Okay, now entering in a unexpected part 3, just to help share some of the pains of going through doing something like this. You've probably seen a lot of the trials of how this thing, whenever I've got it set to only go to a certain point, it'll keep dinging at us and stuff. And then also had a thing where it just wanted to turn on and off Dolby, and then you couldn't hear me on a lot of them. But then also, I have the effect where if I got down to 20%, it would start dinging at me. When it got up to 21%, it would ding at me and tell me, hey, I'm turned off. You're at over 20%. Ding, you're at 20%. I'm turning on. And I found that that was hooked up to the high-speed charger, which is what I can't do whenever I'm watching it, because it's hooked up to it now. And if I get hooked up to a slow charger, sometimes these chargers will actually run downhill slowly, and whenever it reaches 20% again, it'll ding at me again. Oh, but about 1 out of 8 times whenever it does that, you've only got 20% left. Not about size on my hard drive, because it tries to turn off at 45-minute intervals, but I've turned that off. If you've seen recently, I've gone over an hour with a couple of videos, but I may have edited it down to a smaller amount. But it'll do that. But if I get down to 20% power, it'll ding at me too and just let me know, hey, you're getting a little low. But 1 out of 8 times, it'll do what it did last time, and it says you're at that point. So to help save your battery, I'm going to go ahead and end your video right here, which is not cool at all. And just to show you some of the things that I go through. And what's weird is just like less than a minute before that, and you can probably even hear it in my voice when I waver back and forth, I look at the timer here and I go, okay, so it's in the high 30s now. I've only got a couple of pictures left, and then my end picture that's going to go on, and I'm good. I'll probably break it under 45 minutes easy. Won't go on the 30 minute to a third one. Everything's fantastic, and then just then I'm thinking that in the background as I'm talking, and then it goes dingu. And I'm like, yeah, 20%, that's going to be just fine. And then it just shuts off, and I look at the picture, and it goes, in order to save your battery, we turned off your video. And I'm like, no. All I had was, oh, man. So it gets frustrating. So then I'm frustrated sitting here for 20 minutes letting it charge way up over 20%, so I don't have this issue on the way out the door, and I don't plan on it doing it, but I didn't plan on that last thing either. Let's just continue from here. Here's the last couple of pictures that I was going to show y'all. And so it was really just kind of a ending up and looking at things, but there are certain sites that we have out of this cluster of sites, which actually it's 11 that apparently a date to this time, but then there are other sites that wishy-washy around those dates, and a few that go back much further than that, that they're calling an ecological cluster too. And I wonder if they're going to eventually or shortly adopt that into that taxonomy concept, because at this point they're really, I think, just showing these. Whenever you see a presentation, they go, looky here, looky here, looky here, look here. They don't go into these other sites that fall later dates and a couple before. But there are a few things that are different at each one of these sites. One thing that stands out, and one thing that, well, they all pretty much have, so they all pretty much have this bowlware like you're looking at here. And this one, by the way, has a fish scratched into it. And first just looked like a whole bunch of lines, but as you look around the edge of it, one side of it has a fish on it, which you can see from the drawing there on the bottom right-hand corner. And the other side of it seems to have a gazelle type looking thing, as we talked about before. And in between is like a weird structure that the designs go around again, which almost looks like a broom or something along that line. I heard somebody, looked at comments that were under a video like this, and they go, that's a spaceship. You can see where certain people are at on certain situations. But anyhow, looking at this effect here, some of these sites have these bowls that are like there, or like a Yanlar down at the bottom there. But then some sites, they never found really cups, like up in the top middle that has the cross forms on it. So some of those they didn't find in that. But then at all sites, they seem to find this scratched ware, which has lines in it. You can see that listed there. And one that we're looking at is Kortic Tepe. And there's a few things that stand out there too, with their amount of beadwork, which only equals a couple of others out of the whole mess. But then there's that square box that's being made there, and we figured out how they make these round stoneware things, but what's that? And there's a few other concepts that go in there. And then that bottom left-hand corner there, you can see somebody actually made a whole anamorphic bull, and they've got this pourer thing. And you know what's freaky about that? is my grandma used to have a set thing that was like this. It was a cow, and you're supposed to put milk in it, and it's got a little lid thing on it, and you pour it kind of out the rear end of the cow, but not the butt, but like just like this on the haunches of its back. But it's got a little spout thing that's there, and and that wasn't just for milk. That was for creamer for your coffee. And I'm like, what? I think my mom inherited it and stuff, but it's funny how that goes back to 10,000 BC, but it's a special one that's at one of these tell spots. We'll look at also this conglomeration I talked about in a minute. But here you can see they finally carved out a set of bull horns, which is done all in bas relief. So somebody had to have picked it and say, it looks kind of like it, I'm going to finish it off. But they had to go through the trouble of going around the horns and through the horns, while also sculpting the thing out to being less than a quarter-inch deep. And it ends up showing something like that. It's pretty amazing. But then that's one thing that you can see, that only certain things are shown at certain sites. Certain sites may have just a couple of bits, but if color stone that the other ones don't, well, you could understand that easily with somebody finding a rock, right? That should be pretty easy to understand. But then whenever you find an artistic expression like this, it's not too much different than what's going on, but it was thrown in, and I believe this is one of the handful that we talk about where it's unbroken. It doesn't look like it's broken here, and most all of these, except for the Ayanlar in the bottom middle, are all intact and not broken. Well, that top one with the cross points on it too had 2 or 3 pieces knocked out of it, so it's a little different. So now we're looking at archaic sites that are supposed to be attached to this idea of pre-potty Neolithic A and B and things like that. In your bottom left-hand corner, you can see a lot of them that are in the Holy Land, if you will, or in the Levant, in an area well before any of those concepts were actually in play here. And all these different sites. So the only one that you may recognize really the name of, unless you're into this, is Jericho. But then there seems to be a little gap in between there, and I'm not just sure or not if everybody's really looked at the area between there or what goes on in between right there in the upper middle cluster that goes on there. But surely there are other sites where the town was built on top of it and we don't even know it at this point, or it's just up under that little mound and nobody knows, or somebody found it long ago and there ain't much left of it and then it got buried, or what. But then this little cluster, well, not even a little cluster, this gigantic cluster of an ancient civilization that was hooked up to each other. Oh, was this something like Sumer or Egypt? No, they're not interconnected to that point, but they're hunter-gatherers going around each other, all seemingly unconnected. Some making journeys back and forth to these places, it seems, and back and forth. There's a lot of connection with them. But all of these sites that are here, and again, some of these sites will date back before Göbekli Tepe itself, and some of them date on through past it, and they show Abu Huraira and all these other places that are associated along with it, and then how it died off. Abu Huraira is right here again, and it's a site that was caught in an airburst event during the Younger Dryas event, and it went out, and you can imagine that these other sites had witnessed it too. But also you look at it and it's at the top of the Euphrates River running down here, and here we are, the Tigris and Euphrates, and we're talking about these PPNB people. Unless it's trapped up under cities in Sumer that we're unaware of, this people were at a different level. This is the concept of these people that had stonework bowls and things like that at a high level when no one else that's shown on the planet at any other place had something like this going on at all. In fact, even with their toolkits and things years ago, they're far ahead of a lot of different people. But it shows a connective here and how it swamps and really around that whole Fertile Crescent that's here. And again, if we look at these sites, there can be a few things that are different than each other. But then again, if you think about it, there's so much that is exactly the same that we realize it's the same people. You look here and it shows you representatives of those bowls. That's represented by like this here or this here, and then this cup shape, which you can see up here and it's circled, and then Kortic, which we're looking at here, and it's circled, and then it has the tablet-y thing up here, which there were tablet-y stuff that's listed here in Göbekli Tepe and at a place called Herbet Selim, but not any more of those tablets. And then there's cups in 5 or 6 places around here that have been found. But the rest of them all are connected with this same similar stonework. I think that's what's shown here. What they aren't breaking it down into, well, how many of them showed this beadwork and things that's going on and stuff? Well, if you look into it, apparently all of them have everything like that, and the needles, all these things that go together, showing you that they're a common people. But there's a few little things like, well, right out there in the middle here.